Righty, great day in the morning. This is Jonathan Albin, and this is the Session Zero Chronicles. I, was a game master with almost 50 years of experience, want to share with you some tips on how to make your Session Zeros the best they can be. I've got a lot of information to cover, and we don't have much time because I want to get these done quickly and get the information out to you, so let's go. Well, today we're going to be talking about a species of the sec gen. Now, as we have talked about before, the second gen or the sec gen or the second genesis is a group of character races that were created. The species were actually created by a couple of scientists historically by the name of Morrow and Baethra. And Morrow specifically worked on the second genesis of warm-blooded mammalian creatures, and Baethra worked on the majority of the other species, the cold-bloodeds and the avians. So the concept here is that Morrow and Baethra are the forefathers of the entire species collection. And so in this case, we're going to be speaking of one of the largest of them physically, and that is the Pachmyn. Now, those of you that are a fan of video games will probably be getting a chuckle out of that, but the Pachmyn actually derives from pachyderm, which is a name for the elephant type beings, creatures on Earth. And so a pachyderm is an elephant, ergo Pachmyn are elephant folk. Now, they have a considerable number of marks that distinguish them from others, and they are physical manifestations. The skill with which they can be used for greatest effect, each can be drawn from one of the marks of the species. And so I'm not going to go into the particulars of them, but some examples are they do tend to have overlarge ears, therefore they've got an extended range of distance in terms of hearing and also of pitch. So they are more often, ironically, going to be pitch perfect beings. The next distinguishing mark of them, of course, would be their elastic or extendable trunk. So their nose structure actually is prehensile and can be utilized as almost like a third hand, if you will, and so on. So each of the different marks of the pachyderm draw down specifically how they appear, so even their massive size is one of the benefits of them. Now, these are in particular the children, if you would say, children of the Morrowan, so they are from the scientist Morrow, but they are known for having a relatively wide climatological band that they can survive in, and the northernmost ones are known to have grown extensive hair along akin to mammoths or mastodons, and so they are not only large and impressive in their own right, they also are fairly versatile as a species, although they do tend to rarely reproduce. That's really not a feature, but that's a sidelight of their being. Now, they're predominantly headquartered, or they gather most commonly in the Swarthier Plains, which is a rather vast area of the Yarlan continent, but they're also found in the areas around Neomoria, which is in the southern central region of Grolin. So they're fairly accessible as a player class or as a player species, because they can be from either of those two principal locations and yet live virtually anywhere in the traveled and known world. Now, the most predominant historically of their figures was King Babar, and King Babar was the last king of the Savannah, and Savannah was a broader term for the south middle portion of the continent of Yarlan, and King Babar was particularly known because he had leveraged a victory against the possibly aforementioned Lion King. I don't recall if I mentioned that there was a king of the Leonine sec-gen species, a feline that actually had been in rulership since the first inception over 300 years ago, and had only been recently defeated in combat by King Babar. But the king, Babar, not particularly wanting to be a sole leader, created an accord between the Feline and the Pachmyn to allow for a joint leadership where they would basically switch power every 4 years. And it was not too dissimilar from our political state, although there wasn't much in the form of an election. This simply was an exchange, a friendly exchange of power that would go back and forth. Well, King Babar was the person who was in leadership of the savannah when the Draconians made their move. And as I may have already mentioned before, the Draconians were attempting to reinstate leadership by the dragons of themselves of Nimbus, which is to say they were anticipating the return of dragonkind from the skies. But King Babar was also noted for being the person who on the battlefield stated that he would rather die than let his countrymen become servants. And it was a rather poignant battle at that point, because he actually ended up winning that conflict, and so therefore they never had to test his words. A predominant point in history, just in recent past, was the inevitable siege of Slumber. And Slumber was the capital of the savannah. It was no pun intended, a sleepy little town with very little to recommend it in terms of travel or tourism. But nonetheless, it still drew a considerable number of people because of its architectural phenomenon. It was actually constructed to appear to be a large root of a tree. The entire city was walled about with 50-foot walls that were given a rocky arc-like structure on the outside to make it more difficult for opposing forces to climb its face, and it was distinctive, to say the least. There are alleged to be images made of this place, but I don't have any that I can show you at this point. Now, of more recent note, and into this iteration, there is known to be a distinguished member of the Pachmyn population who is in a position of relative power. Her name is Gertrude, and Gertrude is a Pachmyn who happens to be the Carulian priestess of the Blue Veil in the city of Eldrasar. And this person, known far and wide as the Pale Blue Lady, has made some rather questionable decisions about the migration and induction of refugees from Swarthir. Even during the war, Eldrasar had tried to maintain a central position, neither agreeing with or refuting the claims of the Draconians. And yet, in this period of time currently, where there has been a break in that the chosen of the Draconians has been killed, nonetheless, their culture is still attempting to take hold of the rest of the world, and Gertrude has said some very favorable things on behalf of this Draconian, this chosen. So things will remain in a state of stasis for some time due to this, and so we won't know going forward. But as a new persona on Nykos, you may have a cause to interact either with her or with the designs that she has on the world as it is. Cultural influence into the future is got ahead of myself. Iterational impacts. The Pachmyn have had very little direct impact on the iterations, mainly because they did not exist until the 7th and 8th iterations, at which time they were only starting to feel their oats, if you will, and become confident enough to interact with the rest of the cultures. But the the impact, therefore, of the Pachmyn was insignificant at that point. But when we look to the present and forward, the cultural influence on the ninth iteration through people like Gertrude and others like her who have developed persona on the basis of the rather intrepid and stoic spirit of the Pachmyn, allows and affords a huge potential up game, if you will, at this point. So this will have covered the session 0 and in particular the Pachmyn. The series does continue, and I will see you again in the next episode, and we will endeavor to help you indoctrinate players to the concept of playing in the NycosRPG and to enjoying the worlds that you've created. Thank you very much and have a great day. Talk to you next time.